Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so approve the minutes. We're going to defer until later in the meeting. And the burrowing owl breeding season surveys. It's a good, not so good report.
Exactly. And Kailash, who is one of our bird biologists, is here to present for you from ICF.
Thank you. And welcome to Morgan Hill.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I going to have control from here?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There it is. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. It's just the arrows. Okay, forward, back. Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And tonight I'm here to present kind of the findings of what we have from the 2017 Burrowing Owl Survey effort and a little bit of history now that we've had 4 years of survey data come through, that we have a little bit more information about trends and how things are looking, and have some ideas for what's going to be coming up for next year. So the agenda for tonight really is to run through the specifics. Oh, yes. My name is Kailash Mazumdar. I'm a wildlife biologist with ICF. Sure. Oh, yeah, no problem. So we'll talk about what we did this year as far as the details of the survey effort, and then go through the population trends that we're seeing right now, how those have been changing, and what we know about the history and kind of our expectations for future success or lack thereof in some areas of the population. There's a few additional types of studies that have been ongoing, funded, and in collaboration with the Habitat Agency that have been continued over the last couple of years that also have some interesting information that's been coming through that. And then we'll go through the management agreements that are currently underway, and then some of the future management agreements that are anticipated to be coming in the next year or two. We'll summarize some of the details and the information that you saw in the annual report, and talk about the species expert workshop that was pulled together at the beginning of the spring and is helping us look towards next steps for 2018. So starting with the survey effort, our objectives to start off the year was to monitor the known nesting populations of owls. So there's really 5 key populations of owls that we have, mainly up in the South Bay section of the plan area, starting on the west side at the Shoreline Golf Course, and then moving east along the kind of South Bay to NASA or Moffett Airfield, and then further east to the Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility, and then up the bay a little bit to the Don Edwards Regional Wildlife Refuge in kind of the Fremont border area, and then the other population at the San Jose Airport. And those are our 5 populations that we have data for over time, and those are the ones that we focus on knowing what's going on with them year to year. And then in addition to those known populations, efforts were made to monitor the wintering locations of owls over last winter, and then looking at those same sites to see if any of the locations that owls were utilizing during the winter could also be used during the spring and summer breeding season. There was a habitat assessment that's been done looking at public lands and the ability for public lands to be used in collaboration with some of the efforts for owls, whether or not that be actively finding owls in those areas, or if those areas might serve to support owls in the future. And the last thing that we did was last year we found out towards the middle of the survey season that there were owls breeding just across the plan area boundary in San Benito County. And so we had been looking in the southern portion of the plan area, not with a whole lot of success, and then finding out that there were owls there, we made sure to focus some efforts on the adjacent parcels that are within the plan area next to those areas that we found out there's owls breeding in San Benito County. So a quick kind of summary of what went on during the 2017 survey season was that we did monitor all 5 of those main nesting populations, so we were able to gather good data on them, understanding both the number of adults, the number of offspring that were fledged, and then any other challenges such as predation or other pressures that may be encountered by those populations. We did expand the survey effort a little bit into other areas within Santa Clara County, like we had mentioned with the public land surveys, where we're looking at those areas that may or may not have owls, but they're willing land managers that could partner more easily with the Habitat Agency, and so we are looking at those areas as well for owls. And then the last thing that we, I think is a testament of some of the success of what the intent of the Habitat Plan was, is to create a collaborative environment between the different surveyors in the region. And so we continue to keep that group working well together. And now that we're in year 4, it's become quite a common place for exchange of information and understanding about what's going on with the different owl populations. Prior to the onset of the Habitat Agency, all of these groups or individuals were doing owl work year to year, but they weren't talking to each other, and oftentimes they're literally the adjacent property owner or land manager. And so through the kind of the oversight of the Habitat Agency, those groups are all working together, and so we've found that does lead to good kind of discussion and understanding on a whole, better than we would have if we were just individually doing things by ourselves. This is what that group that I've alluded to, we termed the South Bay Burrowing Owl Survey Network, and this is the list of staff and organizations that are a part of that. So that ranges from nonprofits like San Francisco Bay Bird Observatory and the Audubon Society to the University San Jose State, and then a couple other. You can see the whole list. I don't need to go through it all, but it's a diverse group that ends up being really well organized over the year. This map, this shows us the whole plan area, and what we've done over the course of the years is we've broken the plan area down into these 4 main regions that are focused on for survey coverage. You can see that the 2 top areas 1 and 2, are closest to the South Bay, and that's where those 5 populations of owls persist over time. And so those green areas, and I know it's hard to see in this map, and there are zoom-ins, I think, on the annual report, but the green areas are areas that were surveyed this year. The red areas are areas that had been surveyed in the past, and then we determined that those sites no longer warranted annual surveys just because the habitat quality wasn't of a certain threshold to have or support owls, but maybe in future years there could be potential there, but we've ruled those areas out for now. So you can see that the majority of the survey effort does happen within the South Bay with some sporadic sites in the central portion of the plan area, and then those few parcels right there at the southern border of San Benito County. This table provides a look at the main locations that we've had owls over the years. A lot of the sites, you see a blank next to that, and that's because not last year, but maybe the year before that or the year prior, there had been owls persisting over time, and what we've been seeing is a steady kind of a narrowing of the range of the areas that we're seeing owls year to year. And so these have owls that were there, we're no longer seeing them. We're still checking those sites because of the known history that they could have owls, so they're still periodically checked, but so far they're not turning up in any of those peripheral areas. They're really concentrated in these 5 main locations.
So these are just breeding populations, right?
Yeah, this is the total number of adults seen at those locations during the breeding season. And so, because we do have some of these locations that may have wintering owls, but the birds aren't staying during the breeding season. So because of the metric in the plan for gauging the health of the population, the metric is looking at total number of breeding season adults, so that's why we're focusing on that here. Okay. And what we've done also is, in parentheses, we have last year's numbers to compare to this year's numbers, just to give a sense of what we're seeing as far as the fluctuation in the different populations over time. One thing to note, and we'll see it again on another slide, is that most of our populations, and there's a graphic as well that illustrates this, have gotten to somewhat a low end of what we've ever known these populations to have. And with some slight variation at the regional wastewater treatment facility where they've had some increase in numbers over the years, but all in all, the general trend has been somewhat downward trending and maybe kind of fluttering at that low end, but it's at a fairly low level that we're definitely concerned about the long-term sustainability of those numbers. This graphic gives you a quick snapshot of the areas that we did observe owls in 2017. So the center point, or any place that we had a breeding set of owls or an owl during the breeding season in a burrow and we knew where they were, we located that position, and then that's buffered by half a mile, and then that gives us these, the kind of the orange polygon that shows the areas where there's owls. So you can see, again, it's concentrated in that northern portion of the plan area, even outside of the plan area, and then just on the edge of the plan area boundary in the south. And just to refresh us, this figure comes from the original habitat plan, where the way that the owl population was looked at within the plan area was by region. And so we broke the plan area into these 4 discrete regions of the North San Jose Baylands region, South San Jose, Morgan Hill, and then Gilroy. And when the plan was developed, you can see, it's hard to see, but the green areas are all the areas that at that time were known to have owls. And if you kind of look back, we've lost some of the owls in some of the areas that were more in the central portion of San Jose. And that's kind of illustrated also in that table, where some of those locations that previously had owls are just drawing up blanks at this point. This is the list of the names of those 5 populations that we talked about earlier. And here is a table, again, kind of highlighting the total number of adults that we've seen year to year. And being in our 4th year, we'll start to look at what we're seeing as far as changes over time. So in the first year of 2014, we were a little bit higher than we initially had expected, and were encouraged by that, and then had a pretty sharp fall in 2015 and 2016. 2016, I think we had, for almost every one of the populations, we had one of our lowest counts for all of them. 2017, we had an uptick at the regional wastewater treatment facility, and our thinking there is last year they had really great reproductive success, so there was, I think, almost 60 young were fledged out of that area. And so because owls have a very high site fidelity, or they come back to where they were born, where most of those owls were probably owls that were born there last year, and so they have a higher number of adults this year. But there's more to come on that, because just a high number of adults doesn't always yield good numbers, because we didn't actually have great reproductive success at that site this year. So now that we've kind of been talking about numbers for a while, we were able to put this all together and have a somewhat understandable graph. So what we've done here is the green line is a sum of all the known owl numbers year to year from 1990 to 2017. We definitely have gaps in some of our data, and so I wouldn't say that the green is a perfect trend line for what the total population was, but it's our known numbers of owls that we've seen in those given years. I think the most important thing to see, or the kind of the takeaway, is that as from 2013 or 14 on, we've kind of had an initial dip, and then there's been an uptick because of that population at the regional wastewater treatment facility. The concern there is that that site has the total acreage that's preserved is much less than the available acreage right now, because there's additional grassland around that facility that serves as foraging habitat for owls, but those areas are slated for potential future development, and if and when that does occur, that population will be further kind of constrained, and we may not be able to see quite the high level of reproductive success that it's had in the past years once that development comes in, because we've seen that trend happen at a few of the other sites where in years past they had really good numbers, and then overnight off of like disk drive, so many of those commercial areas have built up really quickly, and then quickly an area that looked like somewhat just like a grassy field, which serves as foraging habitat for the owls, no longer serves that way, and now is a big concrete, paved area that has no habitat value whatsoever. And then those adjacent populations often start to see a decrease in number over time. This is an important map because it updates the fee area for the 2018 year for the Habitat Agency, and I think, do we have it? Oh, we don't. So if we overlaid the last 3 years of fee zones, so the fee zone is created by looking at the last 3 years of where owls have been, and we buffer those locations by half a mile, and then that summation of the last 3 years becomes this year's fee zone. And so if we were to overlay each one progressively coming over time, it's been reducing and reducing year to year, more or less. There's a little bit of fluctuation around the airport just because of the locations that the owls are at, but more or less we've lost acreage of fee area. And that kind of illustrates the fact that we've just had a concentration of where the owls are able to persist over time, and that some of those adjacent areas just no longer serve as suitable owl habitat. Those are the kind of takeaways from the survey season. The other things that we want to talk about that happened this year were some more details about the public lands assessment and then the banding efforts that have been going on year to year. So the public lands assessment, and I alluded to it at the beginning, was really an idea there is to take a look at all the available public lands within the plan area and then screen out the areas that model as high quality burrowing owl habitat from a computer kind of desktop analysis, which was done last year. And then this effort was actually taken on between a collaboration with the Habitat Agency and San Jose State University. And so Lynn Trulio's the kind of our regional burrowing owl expert. And so she and Sandra Menzel are heading up this effort. And together, this is the approach that they've been taking. And it makes a lot of sense because if they do identify areas that have high quality habitat for owls, and I guess the best scenario would be that they find some owls, but if they don't find owls, then maybe they can find areas that look like they could potentially be good habitat for owls in the future, and things could be done to enhance that habitat with the hope that owls would then repopulate or inhabit the area going forward. One of the approaches to do this was to look at the whole plan area, select out the public lands, and then select out by different elevation ranges. And the reason for that is, though this isn't the case throughout the species' entire range, the owls in our county seem to only inhabit areas of really low elevation for breeding, at least based off our known information with the owls. It does appear that there may be some in the hills, but we have yet to have any identified in recent times to know that there's actually breeding owls up in the hills, which is somewhat of a quandary because if you look in the Altamont area, which looks similar to all our hills, there's plenty of owls up there, but we just don't seem to see owls making use of our hilly terrain during the breeding season. And so that's why the breakdown by elevation is important, because it more or less kind of breaks apart where the owls are going to probably be during breeding season versus being in the wintering season, where we do see owls utilize those upper elevations in the plan area. So once they finish that desktop analysis, they're in phase 2, which means they're taking what they identified through their modeling effort, and now they went out and are ground truthing some of these sites to identify whether or not the model that they did fits, and if it seems to be playing true, because then they can apply it a little bit more rigorously throughout the area and maybe use that as a selection tool to prevent the need from running around and doing lots of on-the-ground work, that you maybe can screen things out using this approach and then focus in on those areas that turn out to be some of the highest quality areas for owls. And so this is the effort that will be going into this coming year with them. And we've been working with them to identify which sites we think are the best for them to spend the time out on the ground with. Some of that based off of interactions that the Habitat Agency has had with these different land managers, and others just knowing the long-term goals for other acquisitions that may fall in line with the areas that are also suitable for owls. Now we get into just some general updates for the year. one thing that we are always working on and have been working on from the beginning is setting up these long-term and short-term management agreements with other land managers that have either suitable habitat or do have owls. The first one that was set up, I think in the second year or end of the first year of the habitat plan, was the agreement with the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge, where they have had in the past really high numbers of owls, and they lost a lot of their management funding, and so the site was starting to become a lot more overgrown, and so the Habitat Agency stepped in and offered their expertise with the burrowing owl survey network, and also some funding to improve the grassland management out there, with the hope that they could replicate some of the successes that had happened at the regional wastewater treatment facility. To date, the Don Edwards site has kind of maintained a low level of owls. It hasn't gone down too much, but it hasn't seen those increases that we were hoping to see that the wastewater facility has. But it's still a very important key site just because of its acreage. It's almost 700 acres, and there's no future plans for development of any of that land. So it's definitely a location where owls are continuing to persist and should be able to persist over time. And so anything that we can do to enhance that area to maybe bolster the population there, with the hope that that would then help to repopulate some of our other areas that are diminishing. And that's the goal right now. They're holding steady, but hoping that we'll see some increases there. The regional wastewater facility has been seeing increases in their owl population, though this year our reproductive success went in half, so we had almost 60 fledged last year and closer to about 30 this year. So that was a kind of a big concern for us, both there and Don Edwards. The one thing that we're thinking from talking to the land managers and just the observations we made, because we had such heavy spring rains this year, a lot of those areas are so close to the the water table is just at the bay. I mean, they're just on the very edge. And so some of them are maybe 2 feet above sea level. And so with all those heavy rains, a lot of those areas became fully saturated so that all the burrows were full. And we even saw some of the ground squirrels were drowned out of the burrows. So that effectively reduced the total area available to the owls within these locations. And so that's probably one of the main pressures we saw on them that maybe reduced the total nesting success this year. But it's hard to be 100% sure, but that was something that we noted as a big change with half as many owls, and really the only thing we know that was much different between the 2 years was the rainfall. And the one thing that did help us learn, though, is that the owls moved to a lot of the areas that were a little bit higher in elevation, and not that much, but just enough to allow them to escape kind of those inundated areas, and the owls nested in those higher bermed areas. And so one approach that we've had over the years, and we've done it in some of the sites already, is to add just mounds of soil to increase the elevation slightly. That serves as a perch for the owls, but also, in a secondary effect is to bring them out of that flood risk area in some of these places. That seems to be fairly important. Not maybe every year, but in these years like this last year, we had such a heavy rainfall, it really did have an effect on the owls.
So, Kalish, when those raised areas for observation, but are you talking about putting artificial burrows there also? We've
done both, and I think we've seen success both ways. So oftentimes just adding soil mounds themselves, if you have a healthy population of squirrels, the squirrels will quickly seek those areas out. It's easy to dig in the dirt, and they'll quickly kind of colonize that. But that does it's not going to happen overnight. That might take, portion of the season. So there won't be available burrows this season if we were to put a bunch of soil mounds out, but maybe in subsequent years. And so we've done a kind of a mixed approach where sometimes we'll add those soil mounds with artificial burrows embedded in them, which is it's much easier than digging and putting burrows underground. It's a lot easier just to place them and then dump the soil on top of it. It's a quicker process, and it ends up being pretty good for the construction of the burrows, and we did that at a few sites. But then a few of them also just had soil mounds added, and they did see owls use some of those areas during these heavy rain this last heavy rain season. So it seems to be a good approach to add some kind of topographic diversity to some of these sites that are really low lying. But it's a good question. The last two we have to talk about are Steel Wave is a small little portion. I think it's about six acres of nesting, and I think that another 10 acres of foraging that's just north of the City Place or north of Great America on the Baylands area. So it's between the regional wastewater treatment facility and the Sunnyvale Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility. So it's up on the hill. It's probably a site you wouldn't think of for owls, but it's been a long-term mitigation site for owls for years and years. And Audubon brought it to our attention that it wasn't being managed properly, so we engaged with them. And really, we didn't do this. It's not a management agreement over time where we're funding lots of things. It's mainly that through this collaborative effort, kind of a light was shined there that they're not doing maybe what they need to be doing. And so the Habitat Agency came in, brought some expertise about telling them what a better approach to mowing might be to maintain a habitat that's going to be more suitable for owls, and with the hope that we could then see owls colonize that area. And one piece of hope that came out this year was that an adjacent piece of land just below that had owls for the first time in a good number of years. So we do know that owls are moving around along between those populations in the South Bay, and so this site is a good stepping stone between some of those, and so we do have, we're optimistic about that site potentially supporting owls going forward. And then the last one, Ed and I have been working with the San Jose Airport off and on for the last few years, and we've identified a few spots, and they've approached us actually asking for our input on design of enhancing owl habitat, and then also talking with us about areas that they might be open to working with us to manage for owls more specifically. And so we have a meeting scheduled with them. We've made a few site visits to the airfield, and we have a meeting in December where we're hoping to flesh out a few more of the details and maybe set up a long-term agreement there. And this is a bonus because it allows the Habitat Agency to have kind of a good direct line of communication with the airport, which hasn't always been, we haven't always had as much access to their owl population and knowledge about their owl population. So I think the approach that we've been taking over time is we've gained their comfort and they've gained our comfort, and so now it becomes a good kind of working relationship where neither party feels like they're working against each other, we're working together, which is kind of what you want this to turn into. And then the last thing, and we talked about it maybe at this meeting last year where we were assembling the species expert workshop. So the thought is, it wasn't a surprise to us that our owls numbers were low this year. We had seen this trend happening, and so realizing that we're potentially facing kind of a slow die out of our population, we wanted to assemble a larger panel of experts, of burrowing owl experts, not only from California, but throughout the state or throughout the nation that have been doing different types of research on owls over the years, with the hope that a fresh set of eyes might identify something new, or they may have learned techniques or processes that we could apply to our landscape here. And so we were able to pull that together, and in, I think it was early February, we had the workshop. It was a 2-day workshop where we brought them in from, I think there was a total of 5 panelists that came in from both in and out of state, and they collaborated with our local burrowing owl experts, and we kind of all got together. They shared their research with us. We shared the research that's been going on here with them, and we toured them around the plan area, visited the key populations of owls, and then had a follow-up day where we just did lots of brainstorming about what future activities could be done to enhance our owl population. Some of that is a little bit more hands-on with things like captive rearing and potentially adding supplemental feeding. And some of these are a little bit more difficult to get permitted and to get approvals. And so partly having this quorum of experts from, not just local, but nationally, recommending certain techniques and certain practices, that gives us some kind of background to understand what we could potentially do here. And so we're in the steps now of of identifying what pieces of those recommendations could be utilized here within our plan area, and then starting to work with the regulatory agencies to see what they need from us in order to get those steps going. And I wanted, that's kind of the end of what we have presenting. It's open for questions now, but I also wanted to have Ed have the opportunity to speak a little bit more to those next steps, because there's a lot of parties in play that need to all agree, and so we're in the process of building consensus about what that needs to look like, but it may be a little bit challenging, and so we're doing everything we can to kind of pave the way towards that direction, because if we don't do something sooner than later, we may not have an owl population to work with, and so we really want to, I think 2018, that will be, in addition to monitoring the known populations, our focus is going to be on really getting some pieces in gear to maybe be a little bit more hands-on with the population and see if we can maybe bump the numbers up by doing some of these kind of more hands-on practices. So with that, I'll give it back to Ed.
Thank you. So some of our more passionate owl folks aren't here today, but usually we have great questions coming from the pack. Owls, I think, are near and dear to some of our members. So some of the next steps that Kailash was referring to would be captive rearing of the chicks, because there's a pretty high mortality rate amongst the fledglings. So if we take a certain percentage of the fledglings and raise them in captivity and then bring them back into the wild, that's one of the techniques we're thinking of, trying to enhance the population. And some of the ones that would be reintroduced to the wild would be those sites that are being studied by Lynn Trulio and Sandra Mazel, public lands that might be suitable for burrowing owl nesting and breeding. One of the other studies that we're looking at is supplemental feeding, especially in the wintering areas, to try to see if some of the owls that are overwintering here, and the birds that are overwintering are not from our region. They're from Canada, they're from the Northwest, they're from Idaho, other parts of California, but they don't. The birds that we have seem to be staying generally in that Baylands area. So trying to see if some of these birds will stay here, and which is both good from a genetic standpoint, but also an attempt to increase the population. One of the other things we've been talking to the wildlife agencies about is trying to, there's a lot of uncertainty and unknowns about what's going on in San Benito County along the Pajaro River in the Soap Lake area, and potentially being able to go down there and work with farmers and the Nature Conservancy and the Wildlands Mitigation Bank to try to increase the population of the owls in that area. And those are sort of some of our next steps. We're hoping we can also turn around the population out at the airport. One of our biggest concerns is Moffett. There's so much development going on out there. You probably read about it in the paper. NASA, unfortunately, hasn't been a good steward of the owls out there, and so we're trying to work with Google and NASA to turn that around too. But that's a little trickier. So, any questions that any of you would have?
I have a quick question, Ed. Mm-hmm. So I noticed that there was some correlation between owl activity and funding for the program, right? Mm-hmm. As the area shrinks, the area that we're able to collect fees in shrinks as well, right?
Correct.
We lose that buffer zone. Will there come a time, and I guess on the projected decline that we're seeing, it's probably not too far off if we're heading in the same direction. Mm-hmm. Will this completely disappear, funding for these programs, or will there be some other mechanism to keep the programs in play?
The fee was set up in such a way, and it's a fairly high fee, that it would be able to sustain programs for 10 years with the goal of recovering the population. I think most of the population modeling, if current trends continue, the bird will probably blink out in let's say 15 years. There's concern that the Moffat population will blink out sooner than that. The shoreline population, there's extensive inbreeding going on, and there were no chicks fledged out there this year. So we're starting to get to a point where we just have a couple populations. The good news is the areas where we've invested time and money, the population is either increased or it's stabilized, as in the case of Warm Springs. So we're hoping to be able to get out to the airport and recover that population. And if we have then 3 nodes, and then we do some of the captive rearing of the chicks, possibly translocation of adult birds, which is a lot more controversial. There's not necessarily a consensus in the scientific community on whether that's a good idea or not. So the funding would help that. So there's a couple big projects in San Jose that are going through the development review process that would trigger our fees. There's one that I believe is going to be paying fees this year. It's the Evergreen Arcadia project over in East San Jose. One of those isolated population of birds used to be out there. There used to be a nesting pair at Meadowfair Park. So that triggered the fees on that project. So I think funding will be okay. Long term, you're absolutely right. The trajectory is as you described. I was if the Arcadia project wasn't coming in, then I would say our timeline for being able to do things and having the funding for it would have been even tighter.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Has there been any surveying on private lands? Specifically, I'm talking about Young or Richmond?
Yes, a couple ranchers have allowed us to go on their property. We've been out to Kyle's property. We've been out to Sargent Ranch. I'm going to be talking about Rancho El Toro in my EO report. And we've heard some from the ranch manager out there, Justin Andre, that he said there were owls out there. So we're going to take a look. It's under new ownership now, that ranch, so I don't know.
Richmond, you mean? Or,
no Rancho El Toro. Yeah, Richmond's under new ownership too.
Well,
yeah.
have there been surveys in that area?
No. So we're hoping that that we'll be able to look, and when over in Pacheco Pass, when you get over up at the top of the ridge before you go down to St. Louis Reservoir, there is a flat area up there, and that's where the owls have been seen by Justin. So if we can get out there, we'll take a look. There might be an Altamont population that we're not aware of, but I don't know. I'm not super optimistic that there's some large population either along McKean Road or in Shingle Valley or somewhere around Mount Hamilton. I'm just not optimistic that there's something out there that nobody knows about.
We've now reached the point, I think, excuse me, Dick, where you become a local with your knowledge of some of these valleys and such.
Thank you.
What has been the historical success of capturing the fledglings and then releasing them back into the wild after they've matured?
Yeah, they've had good success in Canada with that. Yes.
Have we done it here yet?
They're doing more the studies I'm aware of here are more translocation of adult birds, and that's been mixed success. We've done a lot of that in Southern California and a little bit in Arizona, but I'm not aware of captive rearing activities.
Wasn't the one bird that we got last year that had a band on it was a captive parents and the chick from Canada? That
Oh,
came
from
down there?
BC,
From
right,
BC,
right. And that,
captive reared.
it's an endangered species up there in Alberta and British Columbia, so they spend a lot of effort trying to save the bird. It may end up being listed in this state. I doubt it'd be listed federally, but, yeah.
So are we going to have another convention like we had? Because that seems like, you know, you're learning stuff, they're learning stuff, and, you know, we don't know if it's going to result in, you know, more chicks, more adults, you know, more chicks, but, you know, it seems as though this is the only way it's going to be able to proceed.
Right. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, we're definitely, I think what we're hoping to do this year is take some of the steps that they recommended based off of their observations and put those into practice. And so we're teaming up with Peninsula Humane Society, who's going to offer, they have the ability to provide a captive site to overwinter owls, so we may go that approach. There's a few different success stories that we're trying to work on. So one of them is, instead of just captive rearing them, you create an enclosure out in the habitat that you want them to stay, and you effectively force them to stay there for a portion of the nesting season. And once they have young, they won't leave. The problem that I was talking about that we've seen throughout the state and why there's kind of mixed feelings about translocating is that just put a set of owls in a new spot, they almost always leave and just go back or just somewhere all live together. But if you put them there and then provide food and shelter for them for a while, and then keep them in that enclosure for a portion of the breeding season, move the enclosure, then they've had success with that. Those owls will stay that year, successfully breed, and then their offspring will also come back that following year. So that's I think, the goal, the hope that maybe we can replicate that in some of the sites. There are areas where we have, you know, habitat suitability perspective. It has the right type of grassland. It has ground squirrels. It seems to have enough area for foraging. There's historically been owls, but we just haven't seen owls for maybe a decade. Those sites might be fine for that, where you add owls, and over time then that becomes a new great
Doug, any questions? All right, so hearing none, thank you, and let's go back in the agenda then to approve the minutes of the August 3rd meeting. So if I could have a motion to approve the minutes and a second, and we can move forward and cross one off.
I so move.
Second?
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No noes, no abstentions, so we're good to go. And so on the next item on the agenda. Number 3. No, we're on number 2. Presentation by the Open Space Authority, Coyote Valley Landscape Linkage.
Oh, that's the old agenda.
Oh, that's the, okay,
Yep.
that's the minutes, sorry.
You were right the first time, number 3.
All right, number 3. All right, and that item is?
Restoration.
Restoration, okay.
Completed, planned, and permitted,
We
correct?
got it. And we have a report that was given to us tonight. Okay,
All right,
thank you, Tara.
hello. This will not be as exciting as the owls. Nothing is. I'm Tara Donovan. I'm the program manager at the Habitat Agency, and I'm going to give you an overview of our restoration program, the projects completed to date, and what we have coming up in the next couple of years. So here's our top 5. So we have 5 projects initiated across 7 sites in 4 watersheds. We established 5 partnerships to complete restoration projects. We've received crediting approvals from 4 different agencies. That's both the state and federal wildlife agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Our restoration has benefited 4 covered species and 3 natural communities, and we have over 6.5 acres restored or planned, and also nearly 3 miles of stream restoration planned. So I'm going to go over what all of this means in the next few slides. So our program, here's Santa Clara County, and our program really targets to have restoration occur throughout the county. And since we don't own our own lands yet, we only have one site where we own the lands, and we have another site where we have a conservation easement. We're working both on our own lands as well as the lands of our partners, so the Nature Conservancy and county parks so far. And so we have, our projects are located in a few different watersheds. So our first project at Clara County Park, we have both a pond and wetland restoration project there, and that's in the Guadalupe watershed. One of our planned projects is at Grant County Park. It's a stream restoration project, and that's in the Coyote watershed. Then on Coyote Ridge, where we have our conservation easement, we have a restoration and creation project for 2 ponds up there. And then down in the Pajaro watershed, we've worked with the Nature Conservancy to do a riparian wildlife corridor. And finally, our newest site on Pacheco Creek, we have a planned riparian and stream restoration project. So that's kind of where our projects are located. So what have we been doing over the past few years? Well, looking at our different sites, we've been pretty busy. In 2015, we initiated the Clara Wetland and Pond Restoration Project. We planned that in 2015 through 2016 and then constructed it last year. Now we're in the monitoring phase and maintenance phase, and so for the next 5 years, we'll be monitoring and maintaining that site. The Gonzalez Farm project is a collaboration with us and the Nature Conservancy. That's been being implemented since 2016 and has just been completed as of this week. And so tomorrow we're having a celebration with them on the site. San Felipe Creek at Grant County Park, the Coyote Ridge Ponds project, and Pacheco Creek projects are all in the planning phases. We'll go to construction, which is just planting at Pacheco Creek in the next few months, and I'll talk more about that later. Both San Felipe and Coyote Ridge will go to construction in 2018. We'll start off the season with San Felipe Creek in the spring, and then in the fall we'll go to construction at Coyote Ridge. And both those projects, all 3 of those projects will go into monitoring in 2018, 2019.
Is the Coyote Ridge project the one with OSA?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're our partner on that. So I'm going to go through them a little more detail now. So the projects are at 5 different sites: Clara County Park, Gonzalez Ranch, Grant County Park, Coyote Ridge, and then Pacheco Creek. And our partners have been, for both the Grant County Park and Clara County Park, are county parks. And then the San Jose Water District was a partner at the Clara County Park project as well. They were building the McKean water tank and an in-holding at that park, and they partnered with us on the wetland construction to get credits for the Regional Quality Control Board. At Coyote Ridge Open Space, we're working with the Open Space Authority, and then at Gonzalez Ranch, the Nature Conservancy in Point Blue. And there, we discovered Point Blue's straw program, which is students and teachers restoring a watershed. So they bring out students, local students and teachers, and have them plant trees for the day. And so we're going to be using that same program to do the restoration project at Pacheco Creek. So our program targets both species and natural community habitat. So both at Clara County Park and Coyote Ridge, we're targeting covered species. The driver for those projects is covered species habitat. So both those projects benefit California tiger salamander, and California red-legged frog. The goal is to have those species breeding on site. At Clara County Park, we also have western pond turtle and Mount Hamilton thistle. And so that product was designed to benefit all 4 of those species. And then at Gonzales Ranch, Grant County Park, and Pacheco Creek, for those systems, we're looking more at the natural community there. The species we have that use riparian stream habitat covered in the plan are the tricolor blackbird, Least Bell's vireo, and then our amphibians will use it as movement habitat. But in these locations, we don't typically find those species, so we're really looking at how do we restore the natural communities there. So Gonzales Ranch is a critical location for connectivity between the Diablo and Santa Cruz Mountains. So the goal there is to create a riparian corridor to allow for covered movement between the 2 ranges. And that the Nature Conservancy has properties all along the Pajaro River. Most of them are conservation easements, so they're agricultural lands, and they're working on creating a riparian corridor to link the two mountain ranges. At Grant Park, that site was previously farmed, so it's a valley site, Halls Valley. And when we looked at it, we're like, this isn't really good habitat for breeding for our species. It's pretty dry up there. So our goal is really to maintain water on site longer. So we're looking at improving floodplain connectivity, planting riparian trees, and also doing some repairs to some incision in some of the tributaries there. There's also a spring that we'll be fencing off to protect it from the pigs. There's a lot of pigs at Grant. And then Pacheco Creek, we were pretty much a blank slate there. It's the main channel is in pretty good shape right now. It's very dynamic. The stream channel moves year to year. And so we're looking at some of the tributes as a starting place, looking at the tributaries that feed into that creek to see if we can replant them, because right now there's no vegetation along them. And so we're working with Point Blue to do riparian plantings. That site's also being evaluated as a pilot site to do plantings of California sycamores. One of our partners is doing a study that we had present to you, I think, last time, about propagating sycamores from cuttings. And they're going to be out there this month to see if we can use that site as a pilot project for actually planting the cuttings. So that's pretty exciting. So the habitat plan is also is a permit. And so a lot of what we do is administer permits and get credits. So through the habitat plan, we are required to restore certain amounts of wetlands, ponds, riparian areas. And we get credits from both the feds and the state under our ESA permits, and then also the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for impacts to waters. The 4th permit we're trying to integrate is the Regional Water Quality Control Permit. While we don't have a permit with them, we are seeking credits from them from all of our projects. So for Calero County, and I know these numbers look small, but these are our first projects, so we're really just kind of getting the hang of things. So for the habitat plan, we got over 1/2 acre of wetland and pond credits through the Calero project. And then with the regional general permit, they use a system called uniform credits. And so so you get a certain proportion of credits if you're restoring, creating, or enhancing a site. And so at Calero, we were both restoring, enhancing, and I think we had a small amount of creation. And so collectively, it was just a third of a credit. And the Regional Water Quality Control Board is just really difficult to get credits from. And so we got a whopping 0.05. But we have to bank that, so someone else can use it. And
Sell it to them.
we can sell it to them. So at Grant and Coyote Ridge and Pacheco Creek, those are all in the planning stages right now. And so we have estimates for the amount of credits we'll be getting. Grant is a huge valley, so we have a lot of room to work. And so between riparian And wetland restoration, we're looking at over 5.5 credits. And with streams, nearly a mile of stream restoration. With Coyote Ridge, it's about a little over a third of an acre of pond restoration and creation. And then Pacheco Creek, we're looking about a mile of stream restoration plus some riparian restoration. Yeah, and you'll see there's no credits at Gonzales Ranch. That wasn't really a credit project. It was more about restoring the wildlife corridor there. And so that's the benefit we get from that project. So what does this mean for our program? We're doing great on streams and kind of working backwards from that. We're making some progress. So with Sycamore alluvial woodland, these are very difficult to restore. And so right now we're really focusing on the research part of that. So we have a 14-acre target. We haven't done any yet, but with Pacheco Creek, we have a really good opportunity to do restoration on that site because it has all the habitat components that the sycamores need. For riparian woodland, if all the impacts occur, it's over 300 acres we're required to restore. And we have about 1.5 acres planned. For perennial wetlands, we need about 45 acres if all impacts occur, and we have a third of an acre restored. For ponds, our target is 72 acres, and we have over half an acre restored or planned. For seasonal wetlands, we have a 30-acre target, and we have nearly 4 acres that either completed or planned. And for streams, just over 10 miles are required for restoration, and we'll have nearly 3 miles completed with the planned projects. Okay. So that was a lot of numbers, and now we're going to look at some pictures. So this is Clara County Park wetland. And so the Clara County Park restoration project looked at restoring ponds and wetlands, also providing infrastructure for cattle for watering, and then also providing habitat for our covered species. So you can see here, this is the before picture. We have some old infrastructure in the pond, some pipes. It's heavily impacted by cattle. We do have water there. There's a spring on site, so there is some water year-round there, but you can see that it's not really a thriving site. So after we restored it, we did some plantings, a lot more wetland vegetation. We put in this weir, and that weir governs the water level of the pond, and so that there's always 2 inches of water in the the wetland, and all the excess water flows to a trough, and that trough can be used to water the cattle, I would say about 6 months out of the year. And at the pond, there's also some existing infrastructure. It's fed by a spring box year-round, so there is water available there year-round, but it doesn't necessarily pond. So you can see it's really dried out in the bottom picture. There's no water at all, and this is before improvements. And I was out there in September, and we had to drain the pond because we were doing predator control. So we would have had water there year-round if we didn't have to drain it. So now, again, a lot more vegetation. We've painted the pipe green now, so it looks new. No, we actually put a new pipe on part of it. So we put a valve on the pipe so we can divert water into a 3,000 gallon tank that the rancher there can pull water from, while also watering his cows on site. So there's 2 400 gallon tanks with escape ramps. Those are very important so things can get out. And so the water flows from the spring into filling the 2 troughs, and the overflow goes and fills the pond. And so you can see here, the pond is filled to capacity from all the rain we had this past year. It was actually overspilling the spillway for a lot of the rainy season. So now, we've built this project, and we're going into monitoring and maintaining it. So one of the things we needed to change is the water level. There was some over excavation at the top of the pond, And then also, some of the berm is slumping. And so we're going to raise the level of the spillway. So we are adding another, we added 3 inches of cement to the spillway so that more water will be retained in the pond. And that should bring it to the level that the entire wetland area is filled. And then for the berm, we're going to compact it. We compacted it and reseeded it. So we'll see how that goes for this next season. One of the problems we had was that the upper wetland ran out of water in the trough a little earlier than we were expecting, and there wasn't really good communication with the rancher. And so we had a lot of water at the pond, but no water at the wetland. So we had 3,000 gallons in the tank, plus 2 troughs that were full of water, plus a pond full of water. But because of all the construction that was happening at Clara this past year, the cattle were in a different pasture and were not moved down to where the water was. And for some reason, water was not moved to the other pasture from here. And so we had this nice green wet wetland with lots of vegetation, and then it was grazed because the cows needed water. And so that's something we're working with county parks on and working with the rancher there to talk about the need to move water once this trough goes dry, and that water can be pulled from the pond to bring water to other places on site. And so we're working on that. So I mentioned before, we have some target species. We have the western pond turtle, California tiger salamander, red-legged frog, and the Mount Hamilton thistle. So the western pond turtle is present at the pond, and there's both adults and juveniles, so we now know that there's successful breeding in the area for the western pond turtle, so that's great. For tiger salamander, they're both at the pond and the wetland. Red-legged frog is missing. In fact, it's missing from all of Clara. We did surveys throughout the park this year, and there was no presence of red-legged frog in any of the ponds. So its absence at our site perhaps is part of a larger absence in the area. In Mount Hamilton thistle, we knew it was at the pond, but we didn't know it was at the wetland. And we found a single individual at the wetland, which was very exciting. So our management. So we don't have any red-legged frogs at our pond, but it is beautiful. It is a great compound. I'd move in. But there are a lot of predators. We did predator control. We emptied the pond, and we dispatched, I'm going to use that word, about 30 adult bullfrogs, over 1,000 crawfish, and I don't know how many bullfrog tadpoles. We also relocated 400 California tiger salamanders. So that's about a 10 times increase of what we surveyed earlier this year, and we found 30 to 40 larvae in that pond, and now we have much, much more there. So there was some late season breeding that happened. There's a lot of California tiger salamanders in that pond. And so we relocated them to the wetland. Many of them were ready to leave the pond, and so we hope that they just moved to the upland, and the ones that needed to grow a little longer stayed in the wetland and then left. But because we have water there, we think if there is a red-legged frog getting there, it's likely getting eaten by a bullfrog or a crayfish. So our goal is to bring the predator numbers down and see if that brings red-legged frogs to the pond. So this is one of the salamanders relocated. When you first start moving things, it's clean, and then it gets really dirty. And here's one of the pond turtles. And this is a thank you to all of our partners that help out with restoration, both consultants, landowners, land managers, as well as other partners. Any questions?
The upland habitat for the salamander, has that been worked on as well, or is it sufficient enough in its existing state to
So at Clara, there's a lot of ground squirrels there, so there's sufficient upland habitat. We even have an owl there, just in the winter. And he's so obvious that I saw him, so it's good.
Thank you.
The Coyote Ridge Open Space Reserve, there's 2 covered species?
That we're targeting, yes.
There's so many species up there, why weren't we looking at like the fritillaria, the fragrant fritillaria, or some of the other plant species? Are they being, I don't know, it just seems like there's a trove of things up there to be protected.
So there, we just finished our baseline surveys for those species, so I could report on that next time if you guys want. But the restoration project specifically targets just the herps. So we have the red-legged frog and the California tiger salamander. For the plants, they're actually doing great up there, and so there are some studies that we're going to initiate on Coyote Ridge for the plants, but as far as creating new populations, there's not a need for that yet. Okay.
Yeah, Craig, most of the restoration is focused on a aquatic habitat, because we have all those fees for impacts to aquatic features, and then we take that money and do these restoration and creation projects. So that's...
Because you say that most of the plants are doing well, like the Tiburon Indian paintbrushes, 2 populations.
So that we actually are starting, just sent an email today. So the populations for that are on Waste Management's land and then the Water District land, so we don't have direct control over either of those populations, but we are working with the Water District and Creekside Science to fence off the population on Water District land this year to limit the browsing that happens by cattle and deer. And then there's been some discussions about augmenting that population with direct seeding.
That's what I was thinking about, since there's only 2. Okay.
Yeah, we're probably at least a year away from doing seeding for the paintbrush.
Others? All right, thank you.
Okay. But actually, one more thing to add. You mentioned, like, are we doing anything for the plants? So we have a grant with the Open Space Authority to do fencing improvements at Coyote Ridge, and so part of that will be fencing off some of the drainages where Mount Hamilton thistle is.
Well,
and
there's
then
no shortage of that. I mean,
it's true. And then providing off-channel troughs for the cattle. So.
Yeah, a lot of the rare plants, it's hard to, well, you have 2 challenges. One is the soils in which they persist and trying to reestablish those plant populations there. And it's difficult to reestablish these or create new occurrences of those populations. At least from what I understand about the paintbrush, it's very particular on where it wants to grow and be. So I'm not super optimistic about creating new occurrences of a lot of these plants.
okay.
Yeah. But like Tara said, with the exception of the paintbrush, the rest of the plants are doing really well up there. There's 27, in the surveys on Coyote Ridge, there was 27.5 million Lysingea plants estimated.
But okay, but on the fragrant fritillaria, there's only 2 populations that are, one's for pretty small.
Yeah.
And that one we may do some augmentation to in the future. And we have one that's extirpated that we don't know where it went. So.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Anything from the public? Hearing none. Number 4, final report fiscal year 17 revenue and budget expenditures.
So it went from exciting to put you to sleep. So because of the timing of when we close our books, the municipality...
This is June 30.
Yeah, well, sort of, because The yeah, the books, I mean, the fiscal year closes June 30, but we usually don't get our revenues until the end of July because we get them from this.
Budgets.
Yeah, it is. It's challenging. And sometimes they even come in a little later than that.
The federal year is September.
October, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, September, October, yeah. So the fees come in from, the fees that are collected come in from the 4 municipalities, Valley Transportation Agency, and the Water District, and they remit those to us quarterly. So when the quarter ends at the end of June, we give them, I think it's, 15 business days to get them to us. Sometimes they don't quite get it there. They usually do. So then once we know everything's in, then we do a final balancing of our books. So the report that you have here was the one that was given to the joint meeting in September with the implementation board and the governing board. And the revenues for fiscal year 17 were just under 4 million. It was 396 or $3,946,200. And you can see how it's broken down on where the majority of the fees came from. These are the fee revenues on the first page. And then we also had some revenues from grants, interest, and other sources, which kind of lay it out for you on the next page. On
Edmonds, I'm not seeing that report that you're reading from. We don't, all of us don't have that.
okay.
So if you, can you put it on the screen or is it?
No, I can't, sorry. I would have assumed you would have had it.
This is agenda item, this is on page 77.
Yes.
So it should have been in the main packet.
Well, I didn't get the main packet, so I don't.
Okay.
know.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you.
I'll give you my copy when I'm done up here.
He's got mine now.
Thanks, Walt.
He's more budget man.
On the third page of the report, I think it'd be page 78 or 79. It shows the expenditures. So our fiscal year 17, this was our projected budget of $3,667,377. The actual was $3,055,778. So the good news is that we spent roughly 16.7% less than we had projected during our budget workshop and the approved budget of the board in June of 2016. The page then goes into a description of cost breakdowns and sort of where our cost centers are. And it goes on for a couple pages and gets into final, kind of breaking it down for you from that standpoint. So from a revenue standpoint, we had projected that revenues from fees were going to be a lot higher than, I think we collected revenues from fees, it was a little over 3.1 million. And we had projected it was going to be around 11 million. And the reason for that discrepancy was 2 projects in San Jose did not come in that past fiscal year. They didn't pull their grading permits. One of them, we were told by San Jose both those projects have paid their fees now, so they are coming in this year. So our projections on revenues will be way off this year because we did not include those projects in our fiscal year, this fiscal year's revenue projections, because we've been waiting for them to come in for 4 years. When Ken was here, he thought they were going to come in.
Learned our lessons from
Yeah.
previous years, until we get the money, don't count on it.
So these, so can you see all this?
Yes,
Okay.
we're on page 4 now.
Yeah, so this is the, this is the 77, and that shows you the revenues from fees. This shows you the other revenues from participating special entity projects, as well as revenues from grants, legislative lobbyists that we have, advocate we call her, who works with us and those other organizations that are listed there. And we all pay her to push for certain legislation at the state level. And then you can see reimbursements from PG&E for some survey work we did for them trying to acquire Richmond Ranch jointly. And then you can see the grant, the rangeland management and the phytophthora grant reimbursements. And then on page, what is it here, 79, you can see the expenses. And then these are all the categories of those expenses. And I can get into details on any of those if you would like. Those are listed in the attachment 1 here, revenues and expenses.
Edmund, just a question if I can, on the fees that you're getting from the cities, which are from the developers like myself.
Correct.
I noticed that like in the city of Gilroy, they don't pay a burning owl fee. Now, why is that they don't pay it and other cities do?
It's all tied to where the burrowing owls are breeding. Morgan Hill has that city policy with, I believe, sunsets in 2020 or something like that. So they're unique that they're still collecting fees independent of the habitat plan. So really, it's just primarily the city of San Jose that is paying, projects in the city of San Jose are paying those fees. Projects that have existing development agreements, though, that predate the plan, they don't pay the fees.
The other question I had was, I have a friend of mine who has a piece of property in Morgan Hill, and it's being condemned by the water district.
Oh.
And had a discussion with the water district where they say, well, your land isn't worth a whole lot because it has some mitigation issues, implying that the HCP wasn't part of that, and that would not be the case, as I understand it. If this water district wants to develop and condemn a piece of property for its use, it would have to pay the HCP fee.
Yes, they would.
Okay.
Yes, they would. And we didn't collect as much from the water district in this past fiscal year, but in previous fiscal years, they've paid several $100,000 in fees to us.
I know that they're in the process of condemning the land now to finish off the program that they've had for years in the August Creek through the city of Morgan Hill. And so that work is probably going to start fairly soon, and that would start when they start the grading and then be paying the fees at that time. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they condemned his property, huh? Okay.
Well, they were threatening to condemn it.
Gotcha.
They're just settling it, you know.
Gotcha. So this year, I'm hopeful that the revenues will be a lot more robust than 3.9 million. Which, given land prices here, we need every penny we can muster up. The good news about last fiscal year is we did get a lot of grant funding for land acquisitions. Though the key point is it's for land acquisition, so if you don't acquire land, the money goes away.
But the land acquisition fees have to be used to acquire land. They can't be used for
Correct.
maintenance.
Correct. The fees can be used for, the land cover fees, a portion of it goes to the endowment. A portion goes, very small, like just slightly over 1%, goes back to the 6 entities that created the plan because they put up taxpayer monies to develop it. And then embedded within those land cover fees, some of it does go towards management of the lands that are bought until the endowment is fully funded. And then the endowment, the return on the endowment will then pay for land management going forward. But some of the other fees, like the serpentine fee, that's strictly for serpentine land management and acquiring of serpentine habitat, and the same for the owls.
Not like off-site mitigation fees of the city stay with the city.
Yeah.
Correct. That's all I have to report on just sort of the end of the year. Come next year, you all be involved with developing our budget, of course.
Okay.
And I had just one other far-out question.
Sure.
I know Walt was working with Gavilan, and I'm working on a piece adjacent to Gavilan in San Benito County.
Yes.
And we both have requirements to mitigate for federal purposes and the monitoring programs that we have. Is there any chance that we can coordinate something to satisfy that within Santa Clara County and connect it with what we're doing, which would be, I think, a much more valuable use of the funds because we get much better management and endowments that will protect the land better, even though it's not in San Benito County. Is there any kind of a crossover there that's workable?
I can't. The the federal and state government will not allow us to do that. If I'd be open to it personally, but that's something that's they would never agree to.
And that's what we were told too. That, I mean, it's a good idea, but the plan map is, and we cannot go beyond that.
Correct. So even when we're doing participating special entities, that's like PG&E or school districts like Gavilan, it has to be within the plan area. And we've also helped the San Jose Water Company with a regional board issue, and we helped Caltrans mitigate some projects that they had written their biological opinion, and they all predate the plan, these projects. Some of them were completed even before the plan was approved, but they couldn't figure out how to mitigate because there's no mitigation banks in the county. I mean, the wildlands one is more in San Benito. So the wildlife agencies did allow us to do that, but it was all because it was in the plan area. So that's our restriction. Yeah. The regional conservation investment strategy, which is a parallel kind of framework for conservation, which is being developed by OSA and Valley Transportation Agency. It does cover some of San Benito County. It would be probably a good idea to see if your project, maybe once that gets developed, you could do a mitigation credit agreement through that process that may be able to streamline your permitting, and it may be able to do some of the things that you're describing. Andrea McKenzie would be the one to talk to about that. And I can facilitate that if you two would like to have that discussion. I'm not, it's only part of San Benito County within the Pajaro watershed, so I'm not sure it would cover your project. Okay.
Okay. Ed, you want to talk to us about the
Yes.
executive officer notes?
Yes. And so just something that I didn't have in the notes that I want to bring up, because I just got an email today, Walt did too, that Danielle Davenport had stepped down. And I know some of the terms of you present today are up in, I think, February. So got to think about who would like to, I think, Joseph, you said possibly you may not want to.
I'm going to stick around.
Oh, great, excellent. I'm
Plans
glad to hear
change.
that. Here, claps?
Good and bad, right? Although, if I'd have moved to Santa Rosa, I'd have probably
Yeah.
been in bad shape.
Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm glad to hear that. So, anyone who'd be interested in going for another 4 years or another 2 years, I know these are I think they're all 4-year terms now. I think it just started off as 2 and 4.
Probably so.
Yeah.
So the terms are staggered. So then if you could let individual.
Yes.
Or let everyone know whose terms are.
Yeah, I think Joseph, Richard, Craig, and you, Walt, are all up. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because it would have been original 4-year folk.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a 4 on our name.
Right.
Yeah, so if you're all interested in doing this again, we'd love to have you.
What's the expiration date for our 4 years?
I think it's winter of February, I believe.
February of
Yes.
2018.
Yeah. So,
If
yes,
we re-up, do we get a pay increase on that or not?
absolutely. You
Plus benefits.
you get double cookies.
Peanut butter and chocolate.
Yes.
No, and
Oatmeal and raisins.
Danielle has proved herself to be too busy.
I agree.
I
agree.
And my thoughts as I was coming here tonight was that, well, you speak with your feet and you set your priorities, and so we need to move on to get another input.
Agreed. And I think we will do what we did last time. We'll use next door, Morgan Hill. We'll talk to the Chambers of Commerce because it is a business slot.
Right, and next door, Gilroy, and also the Gilroy Chamber.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna reach out to some developers, KB Homes, the Felices, and see if any of them would like to possibly
Well,
join.
and Dick might have some ideas
Yeah,
on folks who are, up and coming, because these two cities seem to do approvals for years, and
Mm-hmm.
everything that goes for approval, when it's approved, then it gets
Mm-hmm.
continued for 2 to 4 more years, and.
Yeah, right. And I'm gonna reach out to, anybody you'd recommend, Dick, that'd be great. And also Tri-Point Homes, I made a couple contacts there and see if they'd be interested. I think Jess might be up too, so we'll approach him about whether he wants to stick around or not. If not, then we'll reach out to the farming ranching community and see who would potentially like to be part of this.
Same thing, Kyle, if you,
Yeah.
in your travels. But Jed would be, he's got a perspective with the 2 counties too that not everyone has.
Yes, I agree. So, with the regional general permit, that's a very important for public works departments and private developers, and the integration of the water regulatory process with our endangered species regulatory process. So we do have the regional general permit, but now we're trying to set up an in lieu fee, because right now, part of the reason why Tara was presenting on restoration projects, we have to do restoration, habitat, and creation in advance of impacts to waters of the state or waters of the U.S. to be able to allow a private developer or a public works department to use the regional general permit. We have to do projects in the San Francisco Bay watershed and the Monterey Bay watershed. So we want to create something like we have now with the habitat plan fees for endangered species, where we collect money over time, build up a war chest, and then buy property, manage that property. So we're working on creating an in lieu fee program with the Corps, which will mirror sort of what we have with the endangered species mitigation. So we won't always have to be like a hamster on that hamster wheel, always trying to stay ahead of impacts to waters of the U.S. and waters of the state. So I'm optimistic that this can be done hopefully within the next year, year and a half, where we will have this integrated. It has to be approved by the interagency review team, which is the same group that approves mitigation banks, and it can be a long, drawn-out process. So far, so good in terms of working with the Corps to get that done.
And the approval's all within the Corps?
Yes.
Everything is internal?
Yeah, the Corps takes the lead on this. The wildlife agencies, mainly the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, will write a letter of concurrence. The Regional Water Quality Board, I don't know where they'll come out on this. They were one of the ones that submitted comments on our prospectus, our in lieu fee prospectus, and they had a bunch of comments on it that would, I'm not sure how it's going to play out. We're having parallel discussions with them about trying to create a streamlined 401 permit process, and I'm cautiously optimistic we might be able to develop some sort of framework with them that their process can run in conjunction with the regional general permit and the ESA permitting. It'll be still, I'd say, a more challenging integration process than it is with the federal 404 permitting. But I'm cautiously optimistic we're going to be able to get something. And 401 certification, which means they don't even review it. They just accept the habitat plan's conclusion, the applicant's conclusion for certain type of projects. And then a wastewater discharge permit, which is a streamlined process that they have similar to the regional general permit. Well, maybe they would review it within 2 months versus a lot longer. And then not in all instances, and this is where it deviates with the 404, because right now on projects that are eligible to utilize the regional general permit, they pay the habitat plan fees and that's all they have to do. There still may be additional fees or avoidance and minimization measures that the regional board may require of a project proponent, but we're hoping to minimize that as much as possible. And they've been involved, as Tara noted, they provided some credit for the Calero project. We didn't even ask for it. And they've been involved in the very early process of the San Felipe Creek restoration, and we're hopeful we can get a lot of advanced mitigation credits from them for that project, which then somebody like Dick could use if he's doing a project in the San Francisco Bay watershed. And he wouldn't have to then go out and do his own mitigation somewhere. So we're also working with the National Marine Fisheries, also called NOAA Fisheries, on integrating their Section 7 consultation process with the regional general permit. I was on the phone with them the other day, and I have very good news to report that they've agreed to move forward on that with us. So now if you're doing a project that's impacting steelhead primarily is the issue here, so you're in a fish-bearing stream, you no longer will have to wait that once we get through this process, which hope a year and a half from now, you won't be delayed by a parallel Section 7 consultation with National Marine Fisheries. They will tear off of the habitat plan. Fees will have to go up a little bit for projects that are impacting steelhead in fish-bearing streams. If you can, and then we will do restoration and habitat enhancement that specifically targets steelhead. So the advantage for an applicant will be they don't have to wait extra time, but they will have to pay a little bit more on this in-stream fee to offset impacts to fish. And we haven't determined what that would be yet. That's something we'll be in negotiations with them and the co-permittees. From a land acquisition reserve system update, I sound like a broken record on this first one. Clara Park conservation easement ongoing, enrolling county park land into the reserve system. They're concerned about the conservation easement language, and we're working through that with them. And I think it's a trust issue between county parks and the wildlife agencies, and trying to get people on the same page and in agreement that this is can be done. I mean, we're doing it on Coyote Ridge with OSA. We're going to be doing it with the city of San Jose and city of Santa Clara up at the regional wastewater facility. But we're struggling here, and I'm hoping we'll have a breakthrough soon. It's a very important property. The reason why cows are so important out there, and that spending a lot of money on the water infrastructure was important, is because there's a lot of serpentine rare plants on the site, and grazing is really critical for enhancing and maintaining those rare plant populations. So that's why we invested so much money in the grazing infrastructure at the wetland and at the pond. And also the rancher needs the water too. So, so it's a win-win, and that's why Clara is important. It has the butterfly, it has the rare plants. Our biologists recently found yellow-legged frog out there, and even though that's not a listed frog, it's probably more threatened with extinction than red-legged frog, which shows you the craziness of what animals get listed and which ones don't. So we're also in discussions with the United Technology Corporation to acquire the rest of the their missile. So it is where they were developing the rocket fuels and the rocket engines. So that has a lot of the polluted land. So that has a lot of challenges, needless to say. And whether this happens or not will be largely determined by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the Department of Toxic Substances and Controls, I think that's what they're called, DTSC, and whether we can get some sort of clearance, release of liability from them, and a strong indemnification from the UTC Corporation. And the UTC Corporation would hold on to the dirtiest parts of the property too, which they've already agreed that they would. I don't know where this is going to go. I'll keep you up to date as we're going along. We're very cognizant of the challenges of acquiring a property like this, and the potential liability, not just to us but to the co-permittees. And we won't acquire it if it doesn't meet certain criteria of releasing us from any potential legal problems down the road and cleanup costs associated with that. So and would appreciate any input that any of you have on that in the coming months, years, however long it takes.
Love Canal.
Yeah, not that bad. I grew up near there, but yes. I mentioned the buffer land, so I'll skip to Rancho El Toro, and this is where I'll talk about Pacheco Dam. So I'm disappointed we didn't get Rancho El Toro. The neighbor bought the property, very wealthy man, put down a cash offer, and we were too slow getting the offer into the Mathis family. So it was on us, certainly not on the Mathis family. But the problem that we have, if it is an MLS listing and they just want to sell the property because they want to get going, it's hard for us to get our act together quick enough. I learned a lot about this by losing this property, so hopefully there's a silver lining there. But it's pretty hard to compete with somebody that's worth a few $100 million and just puts down $19.5 million in cash. So the man who bought it, I think, loves horses, so hopefully he'll, from what I could gather from his YouTube video, hopefully he will keep the land in ranching and also protect it. The thing that bothered me the most is that the ranch manager who was out there, we were going to keep him on the property. He was evicted, so that was an extra blow when I found that out. That when the person who bought it evicted the family that was living there. But what are you going to do? We were this close to getting it. It would have created quite a few headaches for us acquiring 12,500 acres, because that's a lot of land. But we were excited to embark upon that. Part of the problem was the way the media reported this, and you all may have seen the story in the Mercury News that gave the public the impression that the water district was acquiring the property and that we were partner, that it was the tail wagging the dog, but the truth is that we were acquiring it, but it's the way it was reported by the Mercury News. I think that alerted the the neighbor who had been interested in the property in the past, and unfortunately, the way it was reported and the way it kind of was out there in the public gave a lot of wrong impressions. And because we were the entity trying to acquire it, the water district was going to be a partner in a very small way to help us acquire it, because they have money set aside to help implement the habitat plan. And then there was all this talk about Pacheco Dam. So so what I know about it isn't a lot, and some of the stuff I can't talk about it because these were in private meetings with the water district. But I don't know whether it'll happen or not. It wasn't going to be in conflict with what we wanted to do out there. Most of the best habitat out there was not going to be impacted by this dam. But you're going from 6,000 acre feet to 130,000 acre feet, so that's quite an expansion of the reservoir. It didn't bother the Nature Conservancy, the Moore Foundation, or PG&E, or any of our other funding partners on that acquisition. So from that standpoint, none of us were that concerned. The best sycamore alluvial habitat is Cedar Creek, so that wasn't going to be impacted. It might have impacted some rare species upstream of the dam. We don't know. We never had an opportunity to do surveys out there. So I do know
The grave sites were.
Yes.
Among the.
Yes.
From what I understand and read, that was the biggest potential issue anyway.
It is, yes. It is, as it usually is when you find remains. Those issues a lot of times are worked out, it seems. So I don't know. That would be between the tribe and the water district, and how that. I know the water district board is excited about this project. Whether it gets Prop 1 funding or how it moves forward, it's hard to say. It would have a lot of hurdles to get over to get to a point where they would actually start construction. So it would probably be over a decade away, I think, before we would see it breaking ground, if it ever gets to that point. So disappointed that we didn't get it, but I think the person who bought it probably will not develop it, and county zoning will make it very hard for them to develop it anyways. Yeah. So burrowing owls, I won't really get into that very much at all. Just to note again that the areas where we're doing active management with our partners, there has been a success and an uptick in the populations, but we're only active on really 2 sites with breeding birds. With restoration, I won't get into that very much at all. I'll just note that we applied for a grant on Pacheco Creek to do more intensive design out there. It is a very flashy system. It'd be very challenging from a hydrologic and a hydrologist. Didn't say that right. From a hydrology and a hydraulic standpoint, it'll be a challenging restoration project. And ultimately, if out there, those metrics that Tara was showing you, we might be able to increase a lot of the willow riparian habitat out there, and potentially, if we can figure out the hybridization issues with sycamore, do some sycamore alluvial restoration out there. The 501c3 update, hopefully it will be formed in February, March timeframe. And the sole purpose for us creating this is for the endowment investment with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. We would also be able to do some fundraising and possibly apply for grants that only 501c3s can apply for. So there'll be some auxiliary benefits for that. On the financial update, we have switched from the county as our banker to Chase as our banker. And I can't get into why we did that. There was efficiencies and I think customer service issues that and cost that are going to be a benefit to us by switching from the county to Chase. But because we are doing that, we need to now, we always paid for our audit that was done when the county was our banker, but now they always hired the auditor. Well, now we are hiring the auditor, and we partnered with the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority, whatever that is. Sorry, Jill knows. Jill, thank you. And Jill took the lead on this and did a great job, and I'm not at liberty to say at which firm we hired to do the audit, but one was chosen. We're also going to do an RFP for financial services, and this was really what pushed us away from the county. They would not agree to provide financial oversight to the 501c3, and they weren't providing much financial oversight to the Habitat Agency itself. So we're going to be hiring a CPA firm that will actually do that. Key meetings, I won't list these. These are more for your viewing, but I'll talk about the first one and the last 3. So the first one is high-speed rail. Everybody is concerned about that. When we first acquired the Pacheco Creek property from Caltrans, we sent out a letter to all our neighbors out there, and 2 of them thought we had some connection with high-speed rail. One of those 2 thought we were a front organization for high-speed rail. Some interesting phone calls. And they realize we're not that, and I think we'll get along fine with our neighbors. They all seem to be nice people. So we've had several meetings with high-speed rail, not unlike the city of Morgan Hill or the city of San Jose. Our issues are different, and we have another meeting coming up in December, and it has to do with wildlife mobility, connectivity, as a lot of you may have heard it, both in Pacheco Pass, the Pajaro, and Coyote Valley. It was interesting to attend the South County HRS working group that's made up of the municipalities, and I attended one of their meetings, and their issues are very different than ours. I attended the board meeting in September, county board, and it was very interesting to hear how the citizens of San Martin feel about this. I definitely know how our neighbors on Pacheco Creek feel about this. I know a lot of people voted for it, but it seems like a lot of people around here are against it. So we're working with them, and we're hoping, again, our issues are very narrow. They're not as complicated as the ones that San Martin and Morgan Hill have, or San Jose, or Gilroy for that matter. But we provided comments to the county, and it was part of the board packet. We've shared those comments with the South County working group, and we're part of a larger group of conservation and environmental organizations that meet with the High-Speed Rail Authority to try to get them to do the right thing when it comes to wildlife movement and impacts of their project. At the bottom, it's got some good news. We fought very hard to get $53 million earmarked in the park bond. Now, whether the park bond passes or not, that's up to the voters, but at least we got money earmarked for NCCPs in that. And it was part of the effort of our legislative advocate and our coalition of organizations that are just like ours here. I'm meeting with Assembly Member Stone in November. I've met with Senator Wachowski's staff. I've met with Senator Mauning's staff. I didn't note that, and I am scheduled to meet. I am going to set up a meeting with Senator Wachowski in the next month or two also to remind them the importance of NCCPs and continue to think of us in terms of funding when it comes to bonds and the California Department Fish and Wildlife, and that it continues to be a priority for the State Wildlife Agency.
Ash Clara, who was elected
Yes.
recently,
Yes.
his district included the Coyote Valley area.
Yes.
He's a friendly person.
He is, and thank you for bringing that out, Walt. I met with his staff person too. I haven't met with him officially yet, and they were all very, very helpful in making sure that 53 million stayed in there, because the LA area tried to grab it.
Right.
For Salton Sea and the LA River. We had to fight very hard to keep it from being completely siphoned off by the very powerful Southern California delegation.
And that's why Mawning is key.
Yes, agreed. And as Kailash mentioned, we have a meeting with the airport, and hopefully he and I will be more involved in owl management issues out there in the future. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Yeah, and when the open space does its Coyote Valley landscape, and you're talking about to the governing and implementation board,
Yes.
if you would also notify all of the people here, because, I mean, it's going to be key to what goes on down here. And it's a chance to see other players whose goals are very similar as I see most of ours.
Yes, yes. And that's a vision we're supportive of. We don't take an advocacy position on anything directly.
Good information.
Yes, but if that is the vision that gets implemented and it's agreed upon by the municipalities and the private landowners, then that's something we would support. There seems to be a change in the trajectory of that valley. You have some of Dick's colleagues putting in walnuts, a couple hundred acres going into walnuts. That's a major investment. That's a change in land use and I think on what they originally thought that valley would become. You have the Borrello family partnering with Spinas, and I've already noticed that infusion of enthusiasm and money from Borrello has led to, I can see it, there's more activity out there now. And Post has recently bought a couple properties, one that was going to be that warehouse, the giant warehouse that was off of Monterey.
Trucking firm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's now going to, and they bought a farm that I think they're going to keep it in farming, and OSA and poster talking about some creative ideas to set aside some land for smaller farmers to be able to farm out there, because it's so expensive to buy land around here. So,
Edmonds, where's this valley?
Coyote Valley.
Oh, Coyote Valley.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if I didn't say that, yeah. So, yeah, there's definitely seems to be a change in what's happening there. I don't know what'll happen. I think development can be done there if it's done in a way that's sensitive to some of the needs of the farmers and the needs of wildlife. But we'll see what happens in the coming decades. But there is a changing trend there, I see, with more of an emphasis on farming and open space protection.
Okay. So is there anything else for the good of the program?
I have
that's
a speaker
it.
card for this item.
Say again?
Speaker card for this item.
Oh, we do. All right. Sorry. Doug, you're up.
I was planning on being quiet. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. I have a minor nitpick on a name, and then I want to say a little bit about grazing. Some of us know that there's a Joint Powers Authority, Morgan Hill and Gilroy, the South County Regional Wastewater Authority, or SCRAW. So you throw me every time you talk about the regional wastewater facility when you actually mean SJ/SC Regional
Sorry about
Wastewater
that.
Facility.
Yeah.
You know, I admit it's a personal problem of mine, but I thought I'd mention it. What I did want to comment on, and also as a question, a couple of weeks ago, OSA's resource management specialist, and I'm saying that because I can't remember Galley's last name, Basson? Basson. Thank you. Gave a presentation to the OSA board on their natural resource management activities. And unlike most of their meetings where I'm the only person there who's not paid to be there, there were over a dozen people all interested in grazing and not in favor of using grazing as a management tool on these lands. And they raised a number of issues. They asked some pretty good questions. They weren't completely against using grazing, but they were not in favor of it being just a tool that's casually applied. And so the upshot was that Derek Newman, their land manager, took the questions down, and they'll be getting back to those people. So I was surprised by the energy in the opposition as well as the qualifications of the people and the issues that they raised. So I don't know if this agency has run into that sort of questioning and challenging, but I thought I might ask you because I found it quite interesting to be at that meeting and watch that participation by the public take place. Thank
Yes, I was supposed to attend that meeting, but had a family emergency that had to attend to. And yes, I'm aware of that. I'm expecting someday those folks will show up at one of our meetings. Yep. I'd rather not comment on their views. I will say I don't agree with it, but overgrazing's a problem, and I think every rancher would agree with you on that. Like I was on the Rancho El Toro property. It was a very well-managed property. And we have a different plant community now than we had historically. We got all these non-native grasses in there now. So you had elk and pronghorn and deer evolved with a native plant community. Now you have a plant community that is Eurasian in origin. Most of the grasses came here with the Spanish and with the immigrants from the East, and the East being the Eastern United States, and they brought these European, Eurasian grasses with them, and cows evolved with those grasses. So now that we don't, so even if we had huge elk herds, I don't think they alone could solve the problem. And it's an important management tool for the serpentine, as I mentioned earlier, but also for fuels management. So I expect they'll come here someday and challenge our perspective on this, and that's okay. That's okay. But I don't agree with them. Obviously, too much grazing in certain areas, where oak trees are, or riparian areas, that can be a problem, of course. But a rancher who's a good steward and understands that, which is what I saw on the Mathis Ranch, and I've seen on other ranches, it's I view the two things as compatible. That's sort of how I take it.
Thank you, Doug. All right, hearing none, nothing else?
Oh, hang on one second. The NCCPP was last week before?
Yes.
Did we have anyone there? Was there any report or any information?
Yes, Tara presented, or
Okay, so
sorry,
that
Tara didn't present, but Tara led two panels.
Okay.
One where Gally presented on the connectivity, the Coyote Valley. We had the owl, talk about our owl management program, and so we were well represented this year there.
Great.
Yep.
Well,
Yes.
maybe
Kyle.
to take care of all these bad cows, the first confirmed wolf kill of a cow happened a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So-
Yeah.
But there was also 4 cows killed that were unconfirmed. So, and it was the collared wolf that was in that area for 6 hours with his pack. So maybe that'll take care of the cow problem.
Yeah, when Janet Tilton or Janet Burbach told me that I visited her ranch, and she said, "I love the cougars, but I worry about those wolves." And she, I understand.
They're
Yes,
so cute.
they are. I love wolves. I mean, I won't.
With the grazing too, there's always a negative
Yep.
with that, and I don't know. And
Yep.
then you have to think, most of these people have been on the same piece of property for 100 or 200 years, so
Mm-hmm.
they're doing that for a job. You think they'd be gone a long time ago.
Yeah, and
So-
if somebody came and killed, because I read that the cow was confirmed as worth about $800. So if someone came and stole $800 from me, I would be upset. And
There's nothing that scares wolves away.
yeah, I imagine. Yeah, I don't know enough about
Might
their
last
behavior.
a day or two,
Yeah.
but then they'll be back.
They're very smart animals. Yep. The only
Okay,
good thing I can say is they will decrease your coyote problems.
And everything else.
all right, we'll adjourn.